you for attending this press conference. I, I think that many Guyanese may not have had an opportunity to examine carefully the National Development Strategy. And today, just to pique your interest a bit, and hopefully more people will become familiar with the document. I just want to share with you a summary of what it is all about. And then maybe, having read the strategy, you would then be able to contrast the strategy that we produced in the People's Progressive Party versus the juvenile attempts of the opposition to project that it does have a strategy. So there are 6 volumes. This is just one volume. And then we did a 7th one, which is not considered part of the strategy, but it's more to shorten it, summarize it for those who didn't have the time to read the entire strategy. But there are 6 other volumes of this nature. This is just one of the 6 volumes of the strategy. Now, the first volume is a synthesis of the strategy. So it speaks about the name of this, it's National Development Strategy for Guyana, shared development through a participatory economy. And it was done by a large number, led by the Ministry of Finance, but it involved a large number of civil society organizations and individuals who were part of the working group, the many working groups in the different areas. So if you look at just the table of content, just to give you an idea of what a strategy is and the depth that it has to go into if it would be meaningful, I just want to read out to you the topics addressed when we developed this strategy over 20 years ago. So the first volume focused on the national development objectives, Guyana, the opening of the 21st century. That's chapter 3. Chapter 4, I'm not going to read this with chapters, but just go through. Key constraints to Guyana's development, principal thrust of the strategy, macroeconomic policies as summary, social policies as summary, policies for the productive sectors as summary, and the infrastructure policies as summary. Volume 2 of the strategy is titled the Macroeconomic Strategy, and it deals with the principal macroeconomic issues and constraints, principal orientations of macroeconomic policy, the external sector and the monetary management, fiscal policy and the public sector, debt management, banking policy, macroeconomic projections. The third volume is the social sector. It deals with poverty alleviation, environmental policy, health policy, educational policy, women, gender and development, Amerindian policies, urban development and housing sector, and the role of regional and local government. Volume 4, the productive sectors, agricultural policy and overview, rice development, other agriculture, the institutional framework for agriculture, agricultural land policy, forest management, fisheries policy, mining policy, the sugar industry, the manufacturing sector and technology, labor and employment policy, policy framework for the private sector, tourism policies. Volume 5, the infrastructure sectors, transport development, the energy sector, water management and flood control. And Volume 6, investment program and legislative requirements. The public sector investment program, a summary, and then legislative requirements for the national development strategy. So this is what 6 volumes touching all of these topics here. So you must forgive me when I find it certifiably imbecilic that an opposition leader can unveil a development strategy in his budget presentation. And twice I saw Starbuck News has given the same headline. He unveiled it a couple months ago, and now he unveiled it again. And so, what was this development strategy that the opposition leader unveiled? So, Norton unveils people-centered development strategy. Now you see this word development. The word development means people too. If you can't have a development strategy that is not oriented towards people, because you can have a growth strategy. You can have a tourism development strategy, but you can't have a national development strategy and it's not geared towards people. The ultimate objective of a national development strategy is to improve the lives of people. So people-centered or not people-centered, it's just rhetoric. That's the first thing. And as you can see, our national development strategy extensively dealt with the social sector. So that is why we consider it a national development strategy. It has to deal with every sector of the economy, from infrastructure to the productive sectors to social development. Everything has to be part of a national development strategy. So that's the first thing that Norton, I think, needs to understand. That a national development strategy has to, by its very nature, deal, once the word development is there, deal with people. So Mr. Norton, the key elements of his strategy are a set of slogans. Again, so we can't believe anything that comes out of the opposition. So that's the first point. We've heard about Green State strategy. We've heard about all sorts of strategy from the PNC in the past. Feed, clothe, and house the nation. Every strategy under the sun, but they've never implemented those. But even if we want to take Norton at his word, so Norton says, he gives a quotation, our people-centered development strategy puts people first. And then he goes on to say he wants to find more jobs for them, which is correct. Wants to make more investments to alleviate poverty. And then the people-centered development strategy will ensure that the needs of the people, such as healthcare, housing, water, electricity, education, transportation, and other social services, are of a high quality and guaranteed. Now, this is an opposition leader. Lloyd, can you bring me some water, please? So this is an opposition leader who is criticizing a budget that invests in all of these sectors and say that these will be his priority. Healthcare, housing, water, electricity, education, transportation, and other social services. Those would be his priority in the people-centered development strategy. Well, guess how much of the budget goes towards these areas? The budget that he is criticizing for the areas that he listed will be his priority, over $800 billion of the $1 trillion budget. Nearly 80% of the budget goes to these sectors. Education will have $135 billion, health 130, housing and water 100 billion, energy, which he says electricity, 96 billion, transportation nearly 200 billion, 50 billion for social services. So I can go on and on. It's the same things that he says that he wants to make the priority of his people-centered development strategy. He says that this budget has nothing for people in. Now, how is he going to solve the electricity, give people high-quality electricity without making investments? He listed this as his priority under the so-called people-centered strategy. How are you going to get the electricity? Will it come from fossil fuel? In the 5 years under APNU, there was practically no investment in the electricity sector. Practically no. Small units here, etc. Nothing was done. And already the infrastructure was aging. Now they're criticizing the gas to energy project, but where would it come from? Where would this high quality electricity come from? That is part of his people-centered strategy. And would it be given to us free by somebody from abroad? Where will it come from if you don't invest in it now? And we have $96 billion this year in this budget, nearly 10% of the budget that will go towards investing in energy. And at the end of that project, that will provide reliable energy, cheaper energy, and also address some of the other cost of living issues, not just cost of living issues, but other savings of people. They would save $100 million a year from just cheaper electricity prices. So greater saving, improvement on the cost of living side, and then also cheaper cooking gas on one project. But he says there's nothing in the budget for people, and he will invest in a people-centered electricity strategy. People-centered electricity strategy. So he's going to plug the wires into the ocean, and the electricity would flow freely to our country without making any investments. You all are wicked. You're thinking something else. I'm not thinking that. Just so that is, he criticizes it. You know, just think about it's laughable. That's why I'm saying it's moronic. It's imbecilic. He lists this as one of his people-centered strategy, and then they're opposed to the investment in this area. So healthcare now, he says, will be his strategy, and they're opposed to the building of these 12 hospitals, the new hospitals, and the rehabilitation of the Linden Hospital and the Bartica Hospital, they're saying we're spending too much on infrastructure. Now, how are we going to get the quality of health care up? He wants, great quality health care, high quality and guaranteed. But how are you going to do so with the same infrastructure that we have? These will be modern facilities that will be put in place to ensure that our people across this country, in the hinterland as well as on the coast, our women and children would have vastly superior than what we have now, infrastructure and facilities in which they would receive higher quality health care. And in this budget, $130 billion is going to that. But there's nothing in the budget for it, but he wants to see this as priority. The same thing with housing. So we are not going to invest the $100 billion in housing and water that we have, another 10% of the budget this year. But the house lots are going to come just like that. So I think you get my point. The point is that first of all, they don't have a development strategy. To call it a strategy is a misnomer. It's an injustice, what he has done, the people-centered strategy. They don't have a plan. That has been established by now. Secondly, you can't manage by slogans. So he is sloganeering. Thirdly, he is contradicting himself by arguing that the same things that we're investing in, he wants to deliver to the people of the country. But we must not invest in them now because it's a waste of money. It just shows a very confused mind. Very, very confused mind. So the next thing Mr. Norton speaks about, he says public servants. So they're making a big play for public servants, or as they're the champions of public servants. The fact of the matter is that I see even Coretta McDonald speaking about soldiers and policemen and stuff like that now. Fact of the matter, they took away the signing bonus from them. So Norton quotes Clive Thomas, and we'll come to that in a moment. But he quotes Clive Thomas in his budget speech, and it's a different era. Clive Thomas managed, or not managed, he was at UG and wrote some papers in a different era. He's never managed an economy because he never worked in the government, in the Ministry of Finance, never produced a budget. So Mr. Norton says, in 2024, the public servants will receive 2% of all the income Guyana earns. So now he's taking the income earned by the country, the whole country, in the private sector, by everyone in the country, and is trying to point out, take the $127 billion, or over 10% of the budget, that will go to public servants this year as salaries, wages and salaries. He is dividing the total income, the share, the 127, by the total income that the country will earn, and to get 2%. The public servants are 54,000 people. They're 54,000. Very important group, and they receive $127 billion a year in compensation. But there are maybe 700, 800,000 other people out there, many of which are workers. A better indicator would have been how much is paid to wages and salaries across the whole country to all workers. You can't take public service pay and deflate it by national income. He's creating a new sort of economics now. So if we take public service, the 127 billion, and we now deflate it by two figures. First of all, the total revenue that we're collecting, which is 427 billion this year. That's non-oil revenue. You will find that public service, wages, and salaries is nearly 30% of the revenue that the government collects. So public servants are getting 30% of all the non-oil revenue that we collect. And if you add oil revenue, it takes us to $667 billion. And you deflate the share that public servants will get, it will be over 19%, or nearly 20%. So 1/5 of it. This is a high figure as a share of government revenue. In many countries, they don't receive that. So then he goes on. It was just like interesting for me because he's creating, he and Lowe, I think Lowe might have helped him with this. And so then they decided to see what share of income is kept by people. And they came up with taxation is 12% of your income, so you're left with 88% of your income. Now, clearly, they look at taxation without looking at I suspect they use the number in the budget, the revenue number from the tax authorities. I'm just guessing. And they didn't look at the incidence of taxation. Who pays the taxes, whether it's from personal income tax or from companies tax, its source is non-wages taxation. So they came up with a number, and then they tried to adjust this number to get it down to a real figure that is real income by deflating it further by the inflation rate. It's convoluted. Any first year, if you write a paper like this in the first year economics program, at not a university, maybe in school. In school, you will get an F grade for this. F grade for this. This is pure nonsense. It masquerades as an erudite submission and presentation. It's meaningless, policy-wise, and even just in economic sense. It doesn't make economic sense. So then he concludes, based on this, that in 2015, the share public service, the real income level was 4.21%. And then in 2019, it was 4.92. And under the PPP, it's 1 point something or 2%. It sounds good for people out there, maybe who are on school, but that's nonsense. So let me tell you how it comes up. So if the deflator is the economy, the size of your economy, and you're using wages and salaries and deflating it by a particular figure. So what happens? How do you get a bigger percentage? You can either grow the top figure, or the bottom figure could decline. So all you have to do to get higher wages allocation is to have the economy go into recession. And the economy declines, and if the denominator gets smaller, you have a larger percentage. It's such a stupid thing to do. And as I said before, it's hard to really do a proper analysis when you have such a juvenile sort of approach to a seminal budget presentation from the opposition leader, because he went on and on about it, and it sounds good, and he quotes Clive Thomas. He threw in Clive Thomas there to give good measure to it, you know, to give some credibility to it too. But it's nonsense. It's pure nonsense. He then goes on to say, calculate how much of the economy we are losing through inefficiency. So he says, the IMF says that we are losing 41% through inefficiencies, and therefore added a figure, nearly $200 billion we're losing because of inefficiency. Now, obviously, he is quoting the IMF report done in 2017. He didn't say that. An IMF report in 2017 said exactly the same thing. So I checked for the report before I came up here. I just Googled the report, and I found it actually extensively on the, maybe he saw it recently on Oil Now. It was quoted extensively on Oil Now. And it says in 2017, the IMF undertook a PIMA which estimated that despite a relatively high capital stock, Guyana has an estimated efficiency gap at 41%. This is much higher than the average for Latin America and the Caribbean at 30% and 27% in the emerging market economies. And so the assessment for Guyana pointed to key areas for improvement in PSIP management. And it lists what these are. It's not about, it's an inefficiency gap, or an efficiency gap, basically. It's not how much money you lose through corruption. That is what they say. So it says establish a rule base. This is how you fix it. That's what they say. Establish a rule-based fiscal framework. Establish and make public a policy framework for public-private partnerships. Enhance monitoring of state-owned enterprises. At the start of the budget cycle, include ceilings on capital for individual government ministries and agencies, which we have done. And improve project preparation and appraisal, which we have done because we have done feasibility studies on almost all of these, and almost every road project, every big project that we've had to go through efficiency assessment for it. So this has come down significantly, but he doesn't understand the difference between an efficiency gap and the money being stolen or lost. And this was a 2017 report assessing APNU's operation. At that time, we know what was happening because there was nothing. You know the bridge. Patterson was doing this bridge. They were going ahead with it, and you know the history about that. I don't want to get sucked back into that era too much. So again, he misrepresents what's in the IMF report, and it sounds good, and he makes a whole big speech about it, goes on a long time about it. He speaks about more potholes every day he traverses the country. And clearly, we're just done, we have given out, I think Norton might be eligible too, for a voucher for testing your eyes. Norton might be eligible for that too. Any ordinary people today will see that more is being done to fix our infrastructure network. He says he sees more potholes every day, but they're opposed. Guess what? He doesn't want the potholes. But we have nearly $100 billion in this year's budget to do nearly 3,000 community roads. And they're opposed to it, that we're spending too much on infrastructure. But he doesn't want to see the potholes. So again, we will fill it with other material. We'd have to fill these potholes with other material. I don't want to say what material, but you can use your imagination. So this is the contradiction. Mr. Norton then goes on to talk about foreign exchange and absorptive capacity in the economy and everything else. And so I'm not going to, because it's always a juvenile attempt to drop in there some things that may sound good to the private sector. But the one that struck me most, and I'm going to end here, because I think I'm going on too much, not end my press conference, but end on Norton. So I still have a few more issues to deal with. But he says that we love to do tax reductions that are bring imaginary benefit. So he believes that tax reductions, the VAT reduction, the removal of VAT on electricity is, or water, or data, is an imaginary benefit to people. It's not real. Raising the threshold is an imaginary benefit, and taking thousands of people out of paying taxes or paying less taxes is an imaginary benefit. Removing the VAT on machinery and equipment is an imaginary benefit. Removing the 50% excise tax on fuel, which costs billions of dollars to the Treasury, is an imaginary benefit. So if it's imaginary, then I can understand the philosophical thinking there. If the benefit is not real, then just put on more taxes. And maybe that is what guided them when they were in opposition, because these are not real benefits to people. We get criticized for doing that, lowering taxes, and the taxes have come down significantly since we got into office, but the benefits are imaginary. Therefore, you can guess what, with that sort of thinking, what kind of taxation policy the APNU government could or will have. Norton then mentions things like defense and security, youth development, expansion of the productive capacity of the economy, but sloganeer again on it. Youth development, but we must not invest in the grounds across the country, fixing them up. We must not build more stadia or sports facilities, because that's just capital investment. Just give the money to people and have them eat it up. Again, that's the theme that is running through it. And then to end it, he says, oh no, two other points. He then says, oh, the economy is changing in structure. Now, this is a great point that he made. The economy is changing in structure. And he goes on very long, read out a long thing. I'm like, I don't know how long he took in Parliament. I didn't listen to him. But when I look at his speech just now, when I was preparing to come here, it's a long, thing about it. And now everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. This is no big finding. The economy has changed in structure. And we've been saying this over and over again. Where has Norton been for the last maybe 8 or 9 years when we were warning that the structure of the economy will change once we start producing oil? A significant share of your national output and economic activities will come from increasingly from one sector. We knew that, we spoke about it, we said the way to counter this is to invest some of the resources in the non-oil sector to ensure that we have growth in the non-oil sector. The growth will not be spectacular as in the oil sector, but it keeps the economy diversified. We have been successful so far. If you look at our rates of growth in the oil sector for a number of years, you've seen that they far exceeded the average growth globally for countries. That is in the non-oil sector. The oil sector growth has been spectacular. And that is, we knew this, we spoke about it for 8 years, we warned against it, that the reliance on a single sector. We pointed out that this happened in many countries. We spoke about the Dutch disease and the need to make sure that you manage the foreign exchange of the country and everything else so that it doesn't further kill off the export industries that are very, very sensitive to real foreign exchange or real appreciation or foreign exchange appreciation. So we spoke about these things for 8 years over and over, and they're reflective in the budget, in the macro frame of the budget that he doesn't see. And that is why you have seen, you're staring it in the face, the policy that is designed to ensure that we don't suffer the same fate as other economies, and you can't see it. That's a problem with him. And that's why you see, and they've spoken about it, you see the growth in the recurrent budget tame compared to the massive growth in the capital budget. The same policy that you're criticizing is the policy that is designed from preventing what you're complaining about now, and that the government should be vigilant about. So that is why I'm saying he doesn't understand, and it's contradictory. Complains about this, and then says that you got to change your policy. So you got to spend more now. He says he wants to give out more in direct and indirect transfers to people. So already, when you look at direct and indirect transfers to people, it's $200 billion. When you add wages and salaries, pensions, the part-time jobs, etc., it's $200 billion, nearly 20% of your budget. What are you going to take it up to? What are you going to take it to? And so that is why I'm saying the contradiction is there. He complains about the concentration, but which is understandable, it will happen, but he doesn't support the policies that we are putting in place that are before his eyes in trying to alleviate the economy becoming a monoculture economy. That is what is there. And he has no plan whatsoever. Note that all he does is he says, he just gives the slogan, I want to fix this, but no policy prescription for doing this, because I suspect he has none. And then this big issue about borrowing again. So he has dealt with it, and almost all of them, about we're borrowing too much, etc. And as I said before, if you borrow to invest, it's a good thing, because you expect that the investment would yield a return far greater than the cost of the credit to you in the future. And once that happens, that is how countries grow wealthy, that is how companies grow wealthy, that is how individuals grow wealthy. Because if that didn't happen, we didn't need banks. People would not have borrowed. Companies would not have borrowed. But I suspect your capacity to repay is often assessed when you're going to borrow, your credit worthiness. And we've come from, I saw Coretta McDonald complaining, we're borrowing now and we'll leave this debt to the teachers and the students. And where was Coretta McDonald when we were declared uncreditworthy to borrow? Nobody wanted to lend us any money. When in the 90s, when we were practically starving and didn't have anything in this country practically, the debt, the per capita debt, the external debt per capita was higher than today. The per capita external debt was higher than today, when our economy is $22 billion versus $300 million in that period. Where was Coretta McDonald at that time? So, first of all, if you look at in the G20, the G20 countries made up of 19 of the biggest economies in the world, the European Union, and now the African Union has been added. They produce 80% of the world's output, GDP. 80% of it comes from these economies. And 75% of global trade is done by these 19 economies or so. If you look at their debt to GDP ratio, only one country is lower than Guyana, and that's Russia. Russia has a debt to GDP ratio of about 17%. Every other country, Greece is like 165%, the debt to GDP ratio. In Guyana's case, it's 22%. 22%. So we have the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G20, excluding Russia. In the G7, the average debt to GDP ratio is 128%. That's the biggest economies in the world, 128%. The US debt to GDP ratio is 123%. Germany is the lowest in the G7, and that's 66%, and we're at 22%. So these are, I can go on. In the European Union too, I think of all the 32 countries in the European Union, there are just 1 or 2 countries that have a lower debt to GDP ratio than us. So this would give you an indication of where we stand now on this. And I'm not going to respond to those people because it's just another slogan. It's just another slogan. And we're, as I said before, we're borrowing to invest. We borrowed to invest in the road to go to Linden, to the bridge, the power plant. These will add to the productive capability of our economy. It's not to fund wages and salaries, as we did when we were under APNU. When you take actual debt service in the 90s, which was 94% of revenue, and then wages and salaries in the public sector was about 20% of revenue, but at that time the revenue was so small. 20% we were earning at that time maybe 3,000 Guyana dollars per month. That was the average wage at that time. And so when you add the 20% of revenue to the 94%, it's 114% of revenue. We were borrowing to pay wages and salaries and debt. That is what happened in that period. And also we are borrowing basically to consume. And that's how far we have come. So we don't need to tackle this. Norton attempted to pull like a fast one on the people of this country by claiming that he has a development strategy. They have no development strategy. You can't believe a word that he says because we've heard them before. He could promise you the world and they would never implement it. The day after, they loved the children and then they said, sorry kids, you can't get no money here. We can't afford it. Let's take it back. But buy a fancy vehicle to cost $36 million for the president. So that's what I'm going to say about Norton. This is pathetic, very pathetic. I've noticed a lot about teachers. And I'm pleased that in today's Starbuck News that there was a lengthy response to this government, to what has been said, the lies told by Coretta McDonald and the leadership of the GTU, some of the members of the leadership. Everyone with any sense here would understand that Coretta McDonald is political and in fact vilely so. I've heard some of the most racist comments coming from Coretta McDonald. We have them documented. She has no credibility whatsoever. This is the same Coretta McDonald that used to come to my office as leader of the opposition and complain that she couldn't even secure a meeting with the Minister of Finance or anybody in the APNU government, urging me to raise this matter, which I did several times. She couldn't even secure a meeting. The same Coretta McDonald who complained that APNU was taking away the benefits that we had given to the teachers union, you know, the multi-year agreement, the allowance for housing for teachers. So they have $200 million in a housing fund since 2012. I think it's been there. It's accumulated over a number of years that they haven't decided how to use as yet. 100 duty-free vehicles per year. That was not part of the agreement before. It had nothing to do with wages and salaries that, as president, we gave to them, that APNU held up, that we subsequently learned that the union was corruptly using these duty-free concessions because we handed it over to them to give to the teachers. They were friends and families. They were selling some of the duty-free concessions. The 100 per year. Imagine just how much money. If you had to pay, at that time the taxes were more high, like $5–10 million, some of the vehicles and stuff like that. Just how much net benefits the union had to give to the senior teachers, etc. They had all of this. They had a good working relationship that APNU just threw away. The same Coretta McDonald. So she has no credibility whatsoever. Absolutely none. And vilely trying to mislead the teachers of this country in pursuit of her own political agenda. Not a care about teachers, because her bread is well buttered, was always well buttered. They made some obscene proposals to the ministry just recently that they wanted every time there was a new election of the leadership of the GTU, I think they have about 13 executive members, that they must all benefit from a duty-free concession that the ministry denied. But we expanded the benefit now. The 100 plus now, we've given an additional benefit to those who have attained a level now. When the president met with them, the senior teachers who within 3 years of retirement, if they didn't enjoy the duty-free vehicle, which was 100 per year, then they too will receive it. So that will increase it significantly. You know what she's saying now? APNU gave them zero. APNU wasn't doing this. We gave them 100 vehicles for 100 head teachers, etc. Now we've just expanded it to senior teachers so that everybody who reach a certain level in the teaching profession would at least enjoy this concession, which is millions of dollars that they will get. You know, she complains, oh, 52 is too old to get it now, the duty-free. They didn't give it. APNU, the same party she is with. In fact, they took away some of this, and she's complaining now about it's too old. So this is a political strike. If you look at, I would urge you to read the article in the Starbuck News or the press release put out by the ministry, and you will see the long list of things that were done. So it's 27 things that were done to improve the conditions of teachers in this country. When the president met, look at, just recently, I sat in with the president at those meetings when we were calculating this stuff. The president approved this 4,000 graduate teachers will move to the top of the scale now. That's recently. That will cost us $1 billion more. That's apart from the 6.5% that they got. This is $1 billion more it will cost us. That graduate teachers now will get, with a bachelor's, $10,000 allowance, with a master's, $20,000 per month, and with a doctorate, $30,000. And teachers are now eligible to go on the GOLD program. So we're spending an $11 billion on training now. They're saying, oh, don't build schools, etc. But the teachers are the ones who are going to be working in these same new schools and pay more money. And the $11 billion we're spending on the training now for teachers and other people in the country, who you think it would benefit? It's not some alien. And teachers on the goal now are going to get this sum of money. So once they go in and they get trained, more and more teachers, they get higher increments. They get paid for their higher increments. So, because we wanted more teachers to go and get a master's or a bachelor's or the doctorate, and we're providing the scholarships for them. They can do it online at home, and then they get an increase in salary. I have here the list of how salaries have increased in the last 3 years, especially for graduate teachers and stuff like that. And you will see a marked change. So we recognize this. APNU, they couldn't even secure, the GTU couldn't even secure a meeting to meet with the ministry officials, crying out how, oh, the minister doesn't want to meet with us, etc. The same Coretta McDonald. And now, but this is a political strike. This is that they want to call, because the grievances there are not real. And we all constantly have to engage the teachers. We're investing more and more in education and training and teachers' improvement. And I would urge every teacher in this country to read the list of things that we have been working on and we approve. And they should not fall prey to the likes of Coretta McDonald, who are disruptive. Maybe I just end there because I have a long list of things, but I can go to questions and maybe come back to the questions and answer some issues. Yeah, go on.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo, Kiana Wilbur, Haitian News. I'm not sure if you've seen, but there was a CNBC documentary focusing on Guyana, and there was some comments from Tom Sanzillo, as well as another independent analyst. His name is David Goldwyn.
Sanzillo?
Yes, and the comment from both of them was that an NRF is not enough for Guyana to keep the resource curse at bay. Sanzillo is saying that given its current structure, the NRF is susceptible to being or becoming a slush fund for the ruling party, while Goldwyn is saying that the NRF can be useful, but it needs to have independent managers that are completely independent of government. What are your thoughts on the NRF and its current structure, given those criticisms? You want me to go to the next question?
Okay, let me deal with this first. All right, so the Norwegians started producing oil. The Norwegian had a relatively poor, but wealthier than Guyana economy. And it took them almost 10 years before they started saving money by establishing a sovereign wealth fund. So the same people who urge you to follow the Norwegian management and approach, they don't look at what Norway and many other countries like Trinidad and Tobago and many other countries that have had sovereign wealth fund. They only established the sovereign wealth fund when their level of development had reached, in their determination, a critical minimum. In our case, we started from day one. From day one, by establishing a sovereign wealth fund. And so we will save but small amounts of money, but we already have a sovereign wealth fund from day one. We still have challenges that those countries had to address, challenges of lack of infrastructure, proper infrastructure. Norton complains about potholes, but the same Sanzillo believes that we mustn't fix potholes. In one of his articles in Haitian News said we shouldn't be spending on roads. So Norton would have a problem with Sanzillo too, because he'd break his foot in a pothole. So these people, they they come up with all of these prescriptions for developing countries, but you can't prescribe in abstract. You have to live here, you have to understand the reality of the country, the challenges of the people. So we want to save now for future generations, and the current generation can't even get a scholarship. We must fund their scholarship first of all, because by funding their scholarship, by funding a better, cheaper power, more reliable power, we are developing their productive capacity to create wealth for this country, for themselves, and wealth in the future that would be sustainable and that would vastly exceed the investment we're making. So it is these basically Caucasian people, some of them, who believe that people like us must always follow their prescriptions. We can't manage our own affairs. So ask why Norway didn't start from day one by establishing a sovereign wealth fund. You would hear questions like absorptive capacity and a bunch of nonsense from them. So I don't put too much store on what they say on these documentaries or these programs abroad, because we made it clear our money will be invested in some areas: education, health, some transfer to the vulnerable groups, infrastructure of a productive nature, and we'll save part of it. So that is it. It's not a slush fund, because on the APNU, it could have been a slush fund. Why? Because on the APNU, the Minister of Finance was in charge of managing the fund, the NRF. We amended that by putting in place now a board of directors. It could have been a slush fund. On the APNU, it could have been a slush fund because the Minister of Finance had some committees advising him, a fiscal committee and a macroeconomic committee, but at the end of the day, he had the sole right to determine how much would be withdrawn from the fund. He didn't have to account for it. He didn't need to explain it to the people of the country. It was arbitrary, assumption-based, and he could have taken all or none. Under this government, it's formula-based, it's transparent. At the end of the day, the Minister of Finance, he has no say in this. It's based on the formula. So that is why it wouldn't be a slush fund now. The third element is that under the APNU NRF, there were direct charges on the fund itself, the NRF. We have removed the direct charges from the NRF, so any money remaining in the NRF can only be invested, and the investment proceeds going back to the fund. Any expenditure of oil money must take place through the budget, has to be debated openly through the budget, must be appropriated in the budget, so it can't become a slush fund for a ruling party. We made it clear under the APNU, you could have had slush funds because you recall the signing bonus was put in an account, and that can never happen now, because under the new NRF rule, there's a requirement that the Minister of Finance now publish every cent of that we receive from the oil and gas companies in a timely manner. Within 3 months, he has to put it in the official gazette and notify Parliament. So 4 elements of the APNU bill that could have been where oil money could have been used as a slush fund, we've removed those totally. We have retained the oversight, the reporting relationship from civil society, the scrutiny of Parliament, etc.
Now, I think.
But the San Zilo wouldn't see that. San Zilo, he's still around?
Apparently. Um, I think at a press conference last year, December, I recall asking you what's your advice to Trinidad and Tobago going into this deal with Venezuela. And you said pointedly that Venezuela's Maduro is not someone who can be trusted. And clearly we're seeing those words come to pass. Venezuela has violated the agreement that was signed in Barbados. How is government taking such moves by Venezuela, especially in light of the terms that were signed for the Argyle Agreement, and given that Venezuela has violated the Bridgetown deal, even though it has so much to lose in the process? How's
You're dragging me into a minefield because the United States has recently indicated that the exemptions that were given to Venezuela would be allowed to expire in April if they don't correct the situation as conceived by the Barbados Agreement. That is to allow the opposition leaders to run in the upcoming elections. So a number of people who might be investing or are planning to invest in Venezuela based on the removal of the embargo in the oil and gas sector and the gold sector, they would now be constrained by that new development. I've seen a statement from Trinidad and Tobago where there were concerns about the Dragon Field. And the minister has issued a statement that the United States has given them an exemption beyond April. They've had an extension up to 2025, I think, to negotiate an agreement with Venezuela. And that they are continuing these negotiations. The minister will be in Venezuela to continue the negotiations. So I don't want to, at this stage, say what I truly think. But I just urge Trinidad and Tobago to be very cautious in those negotiations and just be cautious. Just be cautious. And let me don't get into our minefield because I've been following it closely, what's happening. So I don't want it to seem presumptuous that we're advising Trinidad and Tobago because they're doing what's good for their country too. And so we need to respect that in CARICOM and as a sovereign government. But the Venezuelan government often doesn't respect agreements. If it had respected agreements, it would see that it has absolutely no evidence whatsoever that the 1899 agreement is flawed. And if it could repudiate an agreement of that nature on borders settled over 100 years ago by an international tribunal, which they accepted, then it cannot, in my view, be a trustworthy partner in negotiations until it demonstrates otherwise. So we're in our engagement too with Venezuela. We are trying to see if we can work at a series of confidence building measures. But we're very mindful about the extremism that's still in some quarters, not necessarily in the whole government, but it seems to be dominating the government rhetoric there. Some extremism that still exists there. And we hope that they would reconsider. It's not a hope that I think might be realized anytime soon, and go to the ICJ and have this matter settled definitively there, our border issue.
Thank you. Just to follow up quickly on that.
Yes,
so
sure.
that move by Venezuela does not surprise the administration at all. Would you say it's Venezuela just being true to nature?
Which move?
The violation of the Bridgetown Agreement. Would you say that that is something that has not surprised government at all?
No, in this case, there were signs that this would happen, signs that anyone with eyes should see that this was going to happen even before now. It's not a surprise to me, and I'm sure it's not a surprise to many others who've been carefully observing what's going on in Venezuela.
Thanks. I want to take you to another international development. This is with the U.S. President Biden put a ban on the export of LNG. Are you concerned at all about what this policy position can mean for the U.S. Exim Bank, which is overlooking Guyana's application for the loan for the gas project?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure it's an export ban on LNG, but I think they didn't give permission for 17 projects that were building out a capacity to export LNG, because there's been a rapid growth in fossil fuel production in the United States of America. Last year, if you look at combined oil and gas, then they would have exported the most, produced the most, and exported the most in the world. Not exported the most, but produced the most oil and gas in the world. There's been a rapid growth in it. And so I guess the United States, consistent with their domestic policy, where they made pledges to get closer to net zero, then having that done there would be very inconsistent with their stated goal. And so President Biden obviously came under a lot of pressures. But President Biden also, in other parts of the US, have given approval for drilling in the United States. So often it's about the policies are suited to the interests of the United States of America. In our case, we have our gas production, which is the gas to energy project. It is not for export. It is to supplant our supply, which is a bunker C mainly, bunker C diesel mainly supply, which is very polluting. So the mere fact that we are investing in the power plant that would use gas now, we can cut our emissions from the same output, if we look output for output, 1 megawatt for 1 megawatt, by more than 45%. Then it would take us to, it's a cleaner form of fuel, and it would make a big difference here. We're not exporting the gas here, we're utilizing it. And secondly, we are a country that is already carbon negative and will remain so in the future, where the United States and many other countries are trying to get to by 2050. So the circumstances are very different. And therefore, we don't anticipate it will encounter any problem. We've had strong support, bipartisan support in the US from members of Congress on this project.
Good afternoon, Kimal King, Oil Now. If I could just follow up on that specific question. Noting everything that you've just said, there was a recent New York Times article that said that given that President Biden has frozen approvals for those LNG export projects in the US, that there are environmental activists, including Friends of the Earth, who are saying that, okay, this is what Biden is doing at home. Maybe his policy should also mirror this internationally with respect to projects that are seeking US support. And they actually named the gas to energy project as well as the Papua New Guinea gas project. So seeing that the United States election season has started and one of the seeming priorities of the Biden administration is to try to win favor with young voters, do you see that kind of sentiment during this election season potentially cutting off Guyana's chances to get that loan? And if you do find yourself in such a position, who would you turn to next?
So I've made that clear at the beginning that we anticipate that this loan would be approved, and strongly so, but we always have options. And so the project shall be completed. The project shall be completed, and it will make a huge difference in the lives of people here, the ordinary people as well as our business community. Now we govern, we are elected by the people of this country, and we promised them, and they asked basically that to get cheaper, reliable electricity. We have to fulfill the promises to the people of this country. They're the bosses, not environmental activists from around the world or some who are paid here to stop these development projects. And so if they have to target big projects that make a big difference, they'd have to get, the Qatar project is one of the biggest in the world for exporting gas. We're not going to be exporting gas, so we're not adding to global demand. In fact, we're cutting out the demand for a more polluting form of energy. So there's a huge difference here. And so that is my approach to this. But I don't want to speculate, because you could easily speculate if the Democrats lose the elections, then all of these restrictions might be removed. All of the restrictions would be removed. And then you would have the 17 terminals would be approved in the US for export. They would be drilling more in different parts of the US. They'd be producing more and exporting more gas. So we're in the realm of speculation now. But in our planning, we take account of these variables. We know that when we come to the development of the bigger gas strategy, that is monetizing our gas, then we may encounter some hurdles that we believe we can cross. That is not the Wales project, but another project that will hopefully monetize gas for various purposes, because the purpose could just be to supply cheaper power, to do more manufacturing here, or utilizing the gas in a petrochemical industry, or we haven't formally agreed to that as yet, but clearly monetizing the gas is one of our objectives. So that hurdle will have to be crossed when we get to that issue. But for the Wales project, I don't see us encountering that.
Thank you. I'd like to bring us to a conversation we've been having a lot recently about the government spending and where the money is going to come from to support Budget 2024. We saw in Parliament that there was tabled the Fiscal Amendments Bill, and that includes the newly proposed withdrawal rule for the Natural Resource Fund. You had made a comment previously that the current rule is very conservative. Well, this new rule seems quite liberal. I'd like to know if the government intends to withdraw up to the level of that ceiling for the next few years, because it seems like it's not going to leave a lot of room for saving.
And I dealt with that issue right when I answered the first question that was posed to me about the need to save and how other countries address this when you have a demand out there for improved services in almost every area. And so we believe that, and a combination of the funds being utilized in this manner, which gives us a greater return than saving at this point in time for intergenerational equity, which will come later. So it's based on amounts. So if you look at when you get up to about $5 billion, which could be very soon, we're saving 90% of the money over that figure. So it's not a time-bound thing, it is a quantum-bound issue. And so we believe that when you look at the sums, given the size of the budget, it's not unreasonable now to utilize a bit more from the NRF. But when you get to that level, it goes quickly up to saving of 90%. And if we anticipate that at current levels of production, and then some paying back on the projects, that is amortization of the earlier projects, you could get to those figures in another 3-4 years' time. And then you're saving over 90% of the money in an NRF. So we believe it's entirely reasonable. But there are lots of development needs. That's why I said it's conservative.
Okay.
The early one.
You have spoken about how in the next few years, when the government has made much of its capital investments, there would be a steep fallout in the budget because you won't need to spend so much. So at what point do you see Guyana's debt servicing and its debt accumulation reaching a point of stabilization? Like how far into the future?
No, but stabilization means that a couple of things. So when you do a debt sustainability analysis, ours is stable and declining. Our debt, so declining meaning that our capacity to repay is improving all the time. From the early days when we were a hippie country to now. So every year, in spite of the borrowing, our capacity to repay grows. So stabilizing means that it is not, somehow it's unstable now. It's not unstable. It is our capacity to repay and the burden of the debt on the fiscal as well as the share of the debt on our national output is constantly being reduced. So if the burden on the fiscal is being reduced, then it means your capacity to, not that the debt is stabilizing, it's improving. It's improving, the situation is improving. Now, In the future years, maybe you would see even a steeper fall in that, because you could conceivably get down to, if say all the big capital projects are completed, you could get down to maybe 4% of revenue or so. It's about 7% now of revenue to service debt, down from a scheduled debt service of over 100%, an actual of 94% of revenue in the future. So I anticipate throughout our history, we're gonna see moving forward. And even if you have shocks to the economy, that is lower oil prices, etc., our debt numbers are still sustainable. It's sustainable in the long run. So using a word stabilizing is making it look like it's unsustainable. It is not unsustainable.
If I could be more specific about what I wanted to ask, was if we're going to get to a point where the rate at which we're taking on debt is not so much higher than the rate at which we're servicing debt.
No, but the thing is that if you look at the composition of the debt, for example, the debt now, external debt, I'm talking mainly about external. Internal debt, you can easily service that. Countries do that easily. External debt is 1.8 billion now. In 1990, it was 2.1 billion US dollars. It's 1.8 billion US dollars now. In 1990, it was 2.1 billion with a 300 million economy. Now we're $22 billion economy, US dollars. So you understand, it's just anyone with, that is why I see that people don't deal with that. They deal, oh, they're borrowing a lot and stuff. This is how you manage, you know, these are the important metrics, and you have to look at these metrics when you manage. So it's not like a massive accumulation of debt, you know, because we repaid a lot and we got a significant amount written off in the 20-odd years. So anyone coming now to look at a country like that with an economy 60 times bigger and with the same level of debt, a lower level of debt in nominal dollars, like at that time in 1990. In fact, it's significantly lower in nominal dollars, because $2.1 billion in 1990. In today's dollar, if you look at today's dollar, would be probably $5 billion. That's how you calculate it when you look at time value of money. If you were just maintaining the time value of money, you should have had an outstanding debt of about that. But it's 1.8 billion, even lower in nominal sense. So people need to examine this carefully.
For my final question, I just wanted to get back.
Yeah, sure.
Are you going to spend to the level of the ceiling in the fund every year?
It does not. It depends on the fiscal policy.
Okay.
The fiscal policy. So if you draw more, it means that you borrow less in some years, but it depends on the level of the budget, the fiscal deficit that has to be financed. Okay, so everything depends on the fiscal policy. If, for example, if we have all the projects, capital projects come off the budget in 1 year, you may not need all of this money to come out.
Okay, I saw that recently the government published the model PSAs that you said were going to be published.
Yeah, okay, so they did, right, I told them to.
What do those finalized model PSAs entail? Because I remember after you did the consultation for the PSAs, the government did put out the amended PSAs based on the consultations. So I'm not sure what these new finalized PSAs what changes do they include?
So the thing is that this is what was given to the people in the auction. That is how I see it as finalized. So this is what was handed over to the people who won the bids in the auction. So that is the concept of finalized. I said to them, ensure that you put out the document that was shared with those who won blocks in the auction. So that is what it meant.
These contracts have been awarded to the winners of the auction.
Now, yes, so they're given to them. These are the documents given to them, not. So the awards have been made after the approval, the assessment, it went to cabinet, the awards have been made. The signing up of the documents that has not taken place as yet, because there was a need for all the bidders to submit additional information that the ministry requested. So they had a deadline, and that deadline was yesterday. I got one bidder asked for a couple of weeks more, and they were given the 2 weeks more. So at the end of this period, if they're satisfied that the persons who are awarded, or the companies that are awarded those blocks, that they have met all the requirements to proceed to signing the licenses now, or to be issued with the production licenses, then this is the document that they would have to utilize. Now, we may not get to that, because if a company can come up with a signing bonus now, then there is, in spite of them being awarded the contract, they can't conclude the agreement to be issued with a production license. So that is what was given to them. All right.
I had asked you last week about the grievances that ExxonMobil raised with the contract. Are you in a position to update
No,
on?
I'm not dealing with grievances from Exxon, because those would all be dealt with in the context of the negotiators who are negotiating. It didn't come to us as yet. As I said before, it has to be done with our negotiators, first of all. They know what the parameters are, what we said policy-wise. They have to meet with all the bidders. They have to do the due diligence. They have to see all the conditions are met, so to proceed with the signing and the signing of the PSAs and the issuance of the licenses. And then that comes to cabinet, and cabinet says, fine, go ahead. Have you remain true to what we said policy-wise? So that's the process. But since we have not concluded that part as yet, so I can't answer you on the second part.
Abina Rockcliffe, Guyana Standard. Sir, I have 4 questions. I'll just give it off
Yeah, sure.
that. So the government has been focusing and marketing a lot of the strategies that it noted benefits the masses. So the removal of excise tax, keeping the electricity at pre-COVID levels, roads, etc., all those things. But the opposition has been constant in its approach that the priority should be the 16% of the population, the public servants. And in the debates, a lot of the MPs call for a 50% increase for public servants. In simple terms, as simple as you can go, can you say what would be our reality if the PPP decides to move away from policies that benefit the masses and prioritize public servants and give the 50%, even at a time when the private sector wages and salaries remain as it is? What would be the reality? That's one. 2, probably with the exception of Dr. Singh, there is no one else in the National Assembly that can
defend the budget in the way you can. And this is not a jab to any of your other MPs, but you have the experience. Yet, for the last few years, we haven't seen a presentation from you in the National Assembly. You explain your position here, but these are not recorded in the Hansard. I just want to know why this is the case. You mentioned extensively the National Development Strategy and a quick bit about the bit on the section on legislation that will allow for development. I just want you to say what percentage of that we've covered to this point, like how much of the legislation needed for development we have been able to pass. And you basically painted MP McDonald as a opportunity.
Legislation, right?
Yeah. Roughly, not exactly. Yeah. You basically painted the woman as an opportunist, manipulating.
Opportunist.
In other words.
Well, that's your word.
No, basically what you said
no.
be, in summary, described as an opportunist manipulating teachers for her political gains. Basically,
that's your word,
what.
right? But I can use your word.
Okay.
Thank you, right.
But even if we were to take your aspect or your representation of her, she is somehow getting the support of the teachers. So how is the government going to counter the actions of this quote-unquote opportunist so that the children wouldn't suffer?
Okay, that's it. All right. So the last one. So if you look at, yes, I believe, I share your view that it's opportunism. I share your view that it's opportunism, and that's why I said no credibility. I said that about one person, and he sued me, and I'm going to go to Parliament to defend that he has no credibility whatsoever. That's Gulsuran. So the thing is, if you look at the presentation, it's always a combination of lies, crocodile tears, and also racism. And so what we find is a strong undercurrent of racism. They go in little circles, meet with teachers around the country in pockets, and they say, oh, the government is racist. That is why it doesn't want to support public servants. Now, it's a running team, and it's done through whisper campaigns. They can't come out in an overt way like they used to in the past because a lot of the things they've been talking about has been debunked, and people have seen them for what they are. So you recall me saying this a couple of weeks ago about their cost of living rally, where they put Ramjatan to carry that line. He said, you know, they hate public servants. That's why they're treating you badly. And you know why? Because it's a certain demographic. You know what he meant, Afro-Guyanese. So he was speaking to our Afro-Guyanese crowd. And you know why, you know what I'm talking about, this kind of racism by whisper. And so they do a lot of this on the ground. They go, you don't need much of that in Linden and that group that they have there, the Solomons and the others. They've been doing this all the time. Oh, the government is racist, etc. They would ignore the fact that this year's budget, we had nearly $5 billion for electricity subsidy in this year's budget for Region 10, and still talk about racism. That more people are employed in Linden than ever before, that we're going to spend $30 million US dollars on upgrading the hospital, that we're developing a housing scheme now for 1,400 people. They would ignore all of that and go into whisper campaign. Racism. So that is how they work. And they do it quietly in different places. And so that is why I hope that people will see them for what they are. Because they know, teachers know in their hearts what happened in the 5 years under APNU. Any teacher in this country who would tell me otherwise, that under APNU they were getting help and all of that, wouldn't be credible. Because you saw the assault on the sector. If you look at the budgetary allocations to the sector, lower, they practically did not put any money on capital, or very little on capital. That is why. But maybe the teachers didn't know that too much because they don't go to the budget. But the teachers saw what they did to the children. They took away the 1.6 billion to the children. They didn't, the duty free and all of that. So that is why I think it's political opportunism and racism. And I want to say to all teachers, whether you support the PPP or APNU, but this is what they're using it for their own selfish purposes. People like Correct and the others. The percentage of legislation, I haven't looked through because it's thing, but a significant and overwhelming number of those have been improved, etc. If I go through the things, for example, that we did in that period since the LCDS is done, to say modernize just the financial architecture of this country, you'd be amazed. People think that the policy environment that we work in today, I see a stock exchange, the debate over the exchange. But we passed the law on the exchange. 2, New Companies Act, New Insurance Sector Act, New Bank of Guyana Act, Deeds Registry Act, a whole range of things. If you look at the Financial Institutions Act, we modernized the financial architecture of the country through a slew of legislation. If you go to revenue collection, we reformed the agency. We put in place the revenue. We created a semi-autonomous agency, put in a board. It used to be a public sector entity there. And the reforms that took place there are phenomenal. We modernized the treasury function in the Ministry of Finance. We reformed the tender board. We have one of the most modern pieces of legislation, tender legislation, in any part of the world. A lot of these things are not known over the years because they took place, and sometimes we don't talk enough about them. But I can't tell you the percentage now, but a significant amount of them have been done. And if the next time I can get that volume and I can tick them off, the LCDS, not the LCDS, the National Development Strategy in 1996, and I can tick off all of those that have been done. Or we've done much more beyond what was there, because remember, the economy changed over that period, and a strategy constantly has to be upgraded. And that's why I'm saying that you have to read the National Development Strategy in conjunction with the Low Carbon Development Strategy, the Competitiveness Strategy, and the Poverty Reduction Strategy, because they just took out elements of that strategy and amplify them, the National Development Strategy. You as APNU, a single policy document that it has produced outside of paying consultants to do that Green State strategy that nobody utilized. They spent a couple million US dollars of money that we left through the Norwegian fund to develop that strategy and talk about greening Bartica, planting trees in Mabaruma and all of that. That was their green state strategy compared to like our sale of forest carbon and earning $750 million for the country. That was their approach to it. It was nothing. You ask them which policy document they produced. And I noticed somebody talking about the ERP. I think some man from where he lives abroad, I think. Some guy, professor something. One of them talking about the ERP. Brandon or who is the, might be Brandy. I remember some liquor, yeah, Brandy, yeah. So yeah, like that. I saw it somewhere. Now the ERP was a structural adjustment policy. The ERP was not crafted here. It was crafted in Washington. It was a few people who went up because Clyde Rupchen was part of the team, and he told me about who went up there, and the head of the central bank, and who had to, we were declared uncreditworthy to borrow. When a country had all of this debt and couldn't borrow, was a problem. And so Desmond Hoyt agreed to a structural adjustment policy, which is standard for all of these countries that are run into payment problems. And therefore, the elements of that strategy, they had to privatize, they had to restrain public sector investment, you had to, and reduce the numbers of people in the public sector, which led to retrenchment of a number of people. Say in Linden, we had the choice when Hoyt appointed MinProc to either restructure or close, and then they decided to close the bauxite operations in Linden and we decided not to close it, but to get an investor in. When we got into office, this was in the 90s. That was a structural adjustment policy, typical structural adjustment policy. It is not a national development strategy, and they take credit for that now, and it involved devaluation of the currency. So the currency moved from over a period of $4 to $1 to 120 something dollars to $1 in a matter of time. It led to the pauperization of the public sector. Imagine with that devaluation, if you denominate the wages in US dollars, the local wages, average wage was like $25 a month, because now it got deflated by the high exchange rate. So this is what happened there. And I saw them praising the ERP, taking credit. That was in the 90s. That was their strategy. It was not their strategy. It was caused by the country being declared uncreditworthy. It was a standard structural adjustment policy. By 2006, we had worked our way out of it. We no longer had an agreement from 2006 to today with the IMF. From 2006, when I was president, we have these Article 4 consultations where they come, etc. But we didn't have an agreement with the IMF. So this is something that they can only take credit for this. National Assembly not speaking. Maybe I should. Maybe next year I will. But really, the quality of the debate on the other side, it's like it doesn't give me the energy. You know, you can have opponents, and it's good to have like robust opponents, so you can have really a good fight. And when you feel depressed, dejected by the weak arguments, etc., it doesn't give me like the energy to want to fight and want to make a presentation. And then when you do make a presentation and it sounds technical, it doesn't deal with the mundane, they lose interest absolutely because they're not tuned to it. It's not an environment that is like where you can make a robust technical presentation and have it appreciated even. It degenerates. So it's the kind of thing that really I should drink a lot of coffee and go in there the next time. And so maybe that will add to some energy. But the other side doesn't inspire me to make things. Huh? No, zero mental. There was a time when APNU had like great people, who will speak on this thing. Desmond Hoyt was a former president, but when he was there in Parliament, I was Minister of Finance at that time, because he was in charge of planning. So you could relate to him because he would not talk nonsense or try to come up with something that doesn't exist in economic theory, like Norton did here. That's so. And you had people like Kenneth King, and you had Winston Murray, who would manage ministries and stuff like that. There was a time when you encouraged, and I was young at that time, and encouraged to go in and want to debate and stuff like that, because these are people you could, even if you disagree with them, you could, relate to what they were saying. Now, imagine you debating Sherrod Duncan on a budget. It's like, it's a far cry from the past. And so this is what they've degenerated to. Has degenerated to a bunch of like neophyte semi-thugs in Parliament. Thuggish behavior all the time. I can testify to that. One even tried to harm me physically, but this is what they've degenerated to. And it's not very encouraging. Not very encouraging to do that. The 50% increase. So you heard the tenor of what I was speaking about, the need to be careful in the planning process. And I'm urging them to think for a moment. You can't speak about and lament that the economy is getting more and more concentrated around oil revenue, and that the future of oil revenue could be uncertain, right? Because oil prices could collapse like they did in 2015 to under $30 a barrel. Suddenly it collapsed from $120 to $30 a barrel, and then build out a recurrent expenditure that you cannot cut in such a situation, because you're stuck with it, and you build it out on this perception that you'd always have this money in the future. So, and you can't borrow for that purpose, for the purpose of paying wages and salaries, because if you borrow for that, after time you'll go back to what we had in the past. So this is something I say to them, and people don't question them enough. Why you're saying this all the time? How are you going to fund it? What if oil prices collapse? How are you going to fund? You want to expand recurrent expenditure, so all these transfers and everything else, and then you're complaining about the concentration. What happens next week if oil prices collapse? Can you sustain this? If you grow the capital budget, then you can easily slow down a project or stop it, or when it's completed, it's done. So people need to question them more. But in this country, when somebody hears, I'm going to get 50% more, they don't care if the 50% we bankrupt the country next week or next year. And then we all rue it. Everybody suffers from it. And that is what they did in the past, and they want to do it again by making these outrageous claims, hoping that people would hear 50% on the app, no, I'll vote for them because it's political season, I'll vote for them. And when they get into office, you get nothing, or they just will bankrupt the economy. That is why we've been explaining this, but people need to the media needs to turn the spotlight more on them and interrogate them. They will not answer these questions. Can you imagine Coretta McDonald or Sherrod Duncan or Ramjatan for that matter? Ramjatan speaking about this issue? They would not. They would not give you answers. They just so contradictory. They'll talk about, oh, we hate public servants. But public servants are earning much more, $30 billion more than when 2020 they're getting. $30 billion more in these years. And our pensioners are getting more. And there are people of every race, public servants, pensioners, our children are getting more. Everybody. More people are getting employed, etc. So, that's it. Yes.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo and Arthur Williams, Culture News.
Lloyd, get some more coffee.
Just a few quick questions. Firstly, you said government has other options to fund the gas to energy project. Can you shed some light on what are some of those options being considered by the government to fund the said project should the loan not be approved? Secondly, to what extent does the no withdrawal rules protect against the volatility of oil prices and potential market crashes? My third question.
No, there's a second one. What's
The second one?
Yeah.
To what extent does the no withdrawal rules protect against the volatility of oil prices and potential market crashes? My third question. Citizens are complaining
Protect against new
the
withdrawal
volatility
rules.
of oil prices and potential market crashes.
Yeah.
Citizens are complaining that businesses are making money, but the stock price is not moving. What are your thoughts on the need for the stock exchange to be modernized? Norton says Guyana should not have a currency shortage with a 700% increase in exports. Can you comment on this? The discovery of oil has drastically changed the trajectory of resources available for national development. In light of this, is your government working at present on revising or updating its national development strategy? If so, can you say who is leading this?
I didn't get that one. Yeah.
Sorry. The discovery of oil has drastically changed the trajectory of resources available for national development. In light of this, is government working at present on revising or updating its national development strategy? If so, can you say who is leading the process and when can we expect a published draft of the new strategy? And lastly, since the Wismar Bridge was a part of the National Development Strategy in the 1990s, can you say why has government only looked to implement this project now and not back then?
Okay. So the first two. So I don't want to speculate about the alternatives to Exim Bank funding because we anticipate that the funding will be available. And as I said before, it will be retroactive funding. However, without disclosing sources, that we have already been talking about a contingent line of credit that could easily supplant that. And secondly, from the budget. We've already been financing beyond the first 100 million US that we put into the project from budgetary sources. That's the first year. We have been making payments to the company from the budget. So those are two potential sources: own revenue, or from the budget, and from a contingent line of credit that we're already discussing. The second thing about the new withdrawal rules protect against volatility and market pressures. Now the withdrawal rules and market pressure and volatility are two different things. So the withdrawal rules apply to how much will be transferred from the NRF to the budget in a particular year. And it's based on the quantum that comes into the NRF. So if the market is volatile and say the prices are high, then more money will come into the NRF and the formula will apply to that. And if the prices are low, the less will come into the NRF and the rule will apply. The rule doesn't change, and the rule can't address, legislation cannot address market volatility and market pressures. Market volatility, market pressures, often in a country like ours, are factors beyond our determination. So prices can move, prices generally move when there is a mismatch between demand and supply. Prices move. But there could be other factors that drive markets, add to market pressures, and therefore volatility in prices that are beyond just the supply-demand curve, or in fact, they have some relation to it because they anticipate how the events that may unfold will affect either demand or supply. So if, for example, you can't ship oil through the Red Sea because of war there in that area, then it may affect supply, and therefore it would affect prices. The cost of freight will go up, etc. The war in Russia and Ukraine affected supply, therefore the prices went up. The same thing happened for gas. Europe stopped importing some of its gas from Russia, the prices shot up, etc. So those are the factors that affect volatility in oil prices and the pressures, not the rule. The withdrawal rule has nothing to do with that. The withdrawal rule is applied to the proceeds that come into the NRF. The citizens complain about what? Huh? Oh, the stock exchange. So I've asked the head of GRA to give me a list of public companies when I saw this issue being debated in the public domain after a statement by Mr. Rees, that are trading now. And if you go back to the past, when we passed the exchange is a self-regulatory, the stock exchange is a self-regulatory organization. It's privately owned. The stock exchange is privately owned in Guyana, like in many parts of the world. New York Stock Exchange, privately owned. It's not owned by the government. The government passed supporting legislation, the securities legislation that people have to comply with in managing the exchange, and the participants on the exchange have to do that. So that's the first thing. It's privately owned. And then some of the shareholders are members of the board. So the biggest problem in Guyana historically has been the number of public companies we have. Most 99% of our, maybe 99%, I don't know what percent, but in the 90s, more than 99% maybe, are private companies. They're not public companies. So the public companies that are traded now, they're trading at, so banks, DIH, Caribbean Containers, Citizen Bank, Demerara Bank, Demerara Distillers, Demerara Tobacco Company, Guyana Bank for Trade and Industry Limited, Guyana Stock Feeds Incorporated, JP Santos and Sons Limited, Property Holdings Incorporated, Republic Bank Guyana Limited, Rupununi Development Company Limited, Sterling Products Limited. This is what the GRS sent to me. So these are the public companies that are trading. Now, some of these companies, a lot of them have the majority ownership is like a single individual or a single company. So they operate more like private companies. You saw from the head of the exchange that, well, the chairman, he said that these companies are not listed on the exchange. Because to list on the exchange, you can have like greater, I think, movement in shares. The shares can be more reflective of your fundamentals. So if the company is growing and making more money, and the PE ratio is higher, the price earning ratio is higher in the companies, and they have a good dividend policy, if you're listed on the exchange, then your prices go up, your share prices go up, because people find it more attractive to hold your shares, and then because they get a greater income or dividend from the share. In Guyana's case, the first thing is that we don't have a large share volume. Very few public companies, many companies are private and they don't want to go public. Even now, the public companies are not listed on the exchange, because when you list on the exchange, there's a greater level of scrutiny over your accounts when you list on the exchange. So even the public companies. So I don't think Banks DIH is listed on the exchange or any of these companies. But they're trading they're trading through the exchange, but they don't pay a fee. So they're not listed there, but it requires higher levels of scrutiny over your account and regular publishing of their accounts. So a lot of private companies don't want to go public because they're afraid of this. And some of the public companies don't operate like private companies. They don't want to list on the exchange too. So they're not listed on the exchange. But if you list on the exchange, you have the possibility where your share prices will grow in accordance with your profitability and your dividend policy. So we are prepared to modernize this, but it's not owned by the government of Guyana, the stock exchange. It's a private exchange. And so lamenting the fact that we not giving them money and all kinds of stuff, the government is supplementing the exchange, right, and is prepared to give more money to probably modernize. But if you got old computer, buy yourself a new computer. Anybody, a person, now a low-income family could afford a computer. You're lamenting about, oh, we got 22 years old computer? I saw some comments made in the public. But it's a private thing. So, but we are prepared. We've been talking about a vibrant stock market for people to raise money through a stock market rather than having to go through loans in the banking system. But it is, in most countries, this is not the government doing this. The exchanges are privately owned, and the companies themselves want to go public and they want to list on the exchange. In this case, somehow it's made to look like the government is deficient in this matter. So please, let's look at this carefully, and they should ask the companies themselves, why would you list on the exchange? And two, why aren't more, as Georgetown Chamber of Industry and Commerce, right? Industry and Commerce, yeah. Ask them why aren't they encouraging more of their members to go public so that you can have a vibrant exchange, more stocks could be traded there. That's one, it's their responsibility. And two, to ask the existing members to list on the exchange formally, have a formal listing. Somehow, we need to, it made it look like government is deficient anywhere. But as I said before, given that we want to have this happen, we're prepared to work with the stock exchange, with the private sector and everyone else to modernize it. And if it requires money, we will put in the resources to do it too. But this is a privately owned exchange. Norton and foreign exchange. So Norton complains, no doubt, I think that the Kaichor News is like helping Norton a lot, like you're the intellectual, like, inspiration. Because I saw he mentioned about remittances, the whole story about remittances. You saw that too in the speech about remittances. Remember what I said about remittances? You were saying, oh, people here need more, they get more remittances than wages and all of that. Well, we had to explain that the remittances come in, given in the BOP figures, they come in for investment purposes too. So I didn't respond to that, although he needs to look at that. So he says, oh, we're getting more foreign exchange now, and there shouldn't be a shortage. But there is correspondingly more demand too. Correspondingly, when an economy is growing faster and people are investing, then it's not just the supply of foreign exchange that increases, it's also demand for foreign exchange. So when we didn't have a shopping mall and we didn't have like Häagen-Dazs ice cream, we didn't need a demand for that Häagen-Dazs ice cream, so people didn't buy it. Now people want it, so it pushes up the demand. If you look at the demand growth, it's gone for consumption, it's gone higher. For investment purposes, it's gone significantly higher. So capital goods, when they're bringing in, now they brought in over 1,000 new trucks that came in. They have to be financed somehow. When we brought in 200 new excavators, they have to be financed too. So the demand is also growing there. And it's good that we didn't have an appreciation of the rate. That this is precisely what we are arguing against. And that is why we've come out in for great praise from the IMF recently in their article for consultation, where they said basically it's managed well because we have not seen an appreciation of the exchange rate, which could have led to the infamous Dutch disease that we want to avoid, that he complains that we may have. So that's what Norton needs to understand. It's a supply and demand issue, but it has to be carefully managed. Because if the supply far exceeds the demand, then you know what will happen. The rate will appreciate, it will kill the domestic sectors, agriculture and manufacturing, as has happened in other parts of the world, and then we will also, we're part of the resource curse, the Dutch disease phenomenon. updating the National Development Strategy. This is constantly being modified. That's why I said you have to read it in conjunction with the Low Carbon Development Strategy, which was recently launched. So it is now a different focus on sustainability. In the early period, a lot of the tasks have been overtaken. So lots of things we identified then, and the timeline for their completion, it had to be done on the basis of the finances of the country. So you asked why the Wisma Bridge, and I think you were going on to say why the Berbice Bridge. I almost said, weren't you going to say that? Well, Berbice did not have a bridge. It had a bigger population. And the Berbice Bridge, we did it through a public-private partnership where practically the private sector financed it with a concession for 20-something years that expires in 2027. And we've had use of the Berbice Bridge, changed the lives of people here. But we didn't utilize funds from the Treasury. In Linden, we already had a bridge. Now we are replacing that bridge to a 4-lane structure. But we're not doing just that bridge. We're doing also 45 other bridges going to all the other bridges excepting Kurupukari, going to the Brazilian border. We're doing the bridge across the Demerara River right here because our capability to do that now has been enhanced. And so we're not going to make expenditure when they can be sustained. If you understand something about PPP management, we're not doing this simply for the show. It has to be justified, it has to be feasible, and it has to be financed so that it doesn't bring harm to the overall economy. Now we have a capacity to do this. That's why we're doing it today. So there are many things that we said. That's why I'm saying our strategy has been laid out a long time. It's been laid out a long time. And when I say we stay the course, that we are not swayed by the populism. We're not swayed by all of these attempts to distract us from the end point, which is this great life we want for all of our people, all of them, regardless of who they vote for. That's consistent with what we have done. Yes.
And then NCN News. Just quickly, Dr. Jagdeo, as Ghana takes up the presidency of the UN Security Council, how does the government plan to use this to its advantage, and what are some of the priority areas? And secondly, an article was carried in the Village Voice. Ghana hauled before the Human Rights Commission for its treatment of Haitian refugees. They said a complaint was filed and potential international sanctions could be met. Are you aware of that, and how is this being dealt with?
That's the Village Voice. That's the Roysdale Ford outfit. So the thing is that, in fact, I'd be happy if that happened. If it actually happened, I'd be pleased with that, because we want to make sure, in fact, this human rights organization, we'd love them to come and look at what took place, how the Haitian refugees were exploited by corrupt, APNU-supported cabals here who were smuggling the Haitians through Guyana for large sums of money that had direct involvement of APNU officials who are, the way it operated, 40-something thousand people came through the country. They just came here and went through. They were each paying thousands of US dollars to come through here. They were brought from gangs in Haiti along with gangs here. They would arrange for people to come. The government allowed them to meet the refugees, well, not the refugees, these were migrants coming through here, met them on the air side at the airport. They didn't come through immigration normally as people who come to visit Guyana. They call them visitors. If you come to visit, you fill up your form, you come through, you get stamped in, etc. They were met in groups on the other side, taking place in buses. And the buses left straight for the border with Brazil. The buses went straight to the border with Brazil, or get straight in. In some cases, when that dried up a little bit, they started bringing from Suriname. They'll bring them, keep them overnight at some hotels. We have the name of the hotels here, and then put them in the buses and take them away. We've had Haitian refugees whose documents were taken away by the traffickers. And held there. We found children there who were not traveling with their parents or anybody who they knew. APNU should be prosecuted, and some of them for smuggling, state-sponsored smuggling of Haitians in this country. So I'm happy if it goes there. I'm very, very happy if it goes there. And they tried this, the same group tried this with the Bangladeshis when we came in, and we shut it down too. We shut it down. We're not gonna tolerate people smuggling through our country. These were not Haitians who were coming to visit Guyana. They were just being trafficked through our country. These are not Haitians who are coming. A Haitian can come today and come on the immigration and come and visit Guyana on their own. They can come and visit Guyana. There's no prohibition. But this is it. And they talk about the automatic visa. Almost 3/4 of CARICOM don't allow Haitian citizens the same level of access, the free travel that they allow to other CARICOM nationals. Are they racist too? So this is the thing. I hope we can do a document and then have the names of certain individuals sent up to the body to show that they are smuggling Haitian nationals through Guyana. I love that is happening. That's one. But as I said before, this is part of a plan. You remember they didn't get any resonance here. So they're hustling abroad. The US route seems to be cut off because Mr. Jeffries now is busy and other things, and I think he understands now the lies that they are being told. And a lot of the people in the US administration, etc., have seen through these criminals, the Burks and the others. And so they're trying here again with a new body. That's clearly outlined what we'd focus on. That's in a policy document about the UN Security Council. We're not going to use it to our advantage. It's just there are things that we believe strongly in that we'll push there, but not to say we want to use the presence on the Security Council to our advantage. But that has been documented and published by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that position. We're pleased with the ruling. We're pleased with the ruling, and we hope that Israel would comply with the ruling.